Why don't you just disappear like your real father did? That was my mother's birthday gift to me at 14. I said nothing. 20 years later, I built a tech empire she unknowingly applied to for funding. I flew in under a fake name for the pitch meeting. I looked at her and said, "Sorry, we don't fund ghosts." Look, I never thought I'd be posting this on Reddit, but after lurking for years and seeing other people share their stories, I figured maybe it's time. Fair warning, this is going to be a long one, and probably the first of several posts because there's too much to fit in one. This all started 20 years ago, but the payoff happened just last month, and holy shit, was it worth the wait? Growing up in a small Midwestern town wasn't exactly the American dream. My mother pretended it was to her Facebook friends. Behind our average-looking split-level house, with its peeling paint and that one creaky step that never got fixed, was a different reality. Here's the thing. My mother had a talent for making me feel like I was somehow both invisible and the source of all her problems at the same time. My dad left when I was 3. I barely remember him, just flashes of someone tall with a laugh that seemed to fill up rooms. Mom told me he just disappeared one day, which I later figured out meant he moved to Arizona with his secretary. Classic, right? But what wasn't classic was how my mom weaponized his absence against me for the next decade and a half. Every time I did something that annoyed her, forgot to take out the trash, got a B instead of an A, stayed up too late gaming, it was the same story. I was just like him. Being compared to a ghost isn't fun when you're 8 or 12, or any age really. But what happened on my 14th birthday was next level. Mom had actually planned a party. This was rare because money was always too tight for celebrations, though somehow never too tight for her wine subscription. A few kids from school came over, probably more for the promised pizza than for me, TBH. I wasn't exactly Mr. Popular, more the slightly awkward kid who knew how to fix everyone's computer problem. Everything was going fine until I opened her gift. It was a second-hand laptop. Not new, definitely refurbished, but still the best present I'd ever gotten. I was hyped, started talking about all the coding I could do now, how I could finally work on actual projects instead of just using the ancient desktops at school. I was geeking out hard. That's when she said it, right in front of everyone. "Why don't you just disappear like your real father did?" The room went dead silent. My friend Albert stared at his pizza like it was suddenly the most interesting thing in the world. Kayla, this girl I had a massive crush on, looked at me with this mix of pity and secondhand embarrassment that made me want to evaporate on the spot. I said nothing, just took the laptop and nodded. The party broke up pretty fast after that. Later that night, after everyone left and Mom was passed out on the couch with her special iced tea, vodka, barely disguised, I made myself a promise while setting up that laptop. Someday, I'd disappear all right, but I'd make damn sure she'd notice. Here's the thing about trauma. It either breaks you or becomes rocket fuel. For me, it was premium grade. School became my escape plan. Every A was a step away from that house. Every coding competition, every extra credit assignment, every all-nighter learning Python, and later JavaScript wasn't just about the knowledge. It was about building a ladder to climb out. Mom hated it. She'd come into my room at 2 a.m., flip on the lights, and start ranting about the electricity bill, or how the clicking of my keyboard was keeping her up. The real issue? I was focused on something that wasn't her. Classic narc behavior, as I'd later learn from hours scrolling through our Raised by Narcissists. Senior year, I applied for every scholarship I could find. Ended up getting a decent one to State University about 3 hours away. Not far enough, but a start. When I told her, she laughed and said I'd be back home by Thanksgiving, broke and failing. That prediction aged like milk left in a hot car. College was freedom. First time in my life I could breathe without feeling her disapproval crushing my chest. Worked 3 jobs, campus IT help desk during the day, delivery driver evenings, freelance coding on weekends. Sleep was optional. Independence wasn't. Sophomore year, I met Arnold in my advanced algorithms class. He was this old-school professor who coded on punch cards back in the day, but somehow still knew more about emerging tech than most of the students. He noticed me falling asleep in class one day, thanks, 3 jobs. But instead of calling me out, he invited me to his office. That meeting changed everything. Arnold became the mentor I never had. He helped me streamline my course load, connected me with paid internships that actually taught me useful skills, and sometimes just let me vent about my mom without offering those generic platitudes people throw around when they don't get toxic family dynamics. Graduation day came. Mom showed up late, complained about the parking, and spent most of the ceremony on her phone. When Arnold came over to congratulate me, she suddenly became super proud mom, taking credit for always supporting his computer hobby. I saw Arnold's expression shift as he figured out exactly what kind of parent she was. He just gave me this look that said everything without saying anything. First real job was at a mid-sized tech firm. Nothing fancy, but the salary seemed insane to someone who grew up watching his mom check the couch cushions for change to buy groceries. I moved into my own apartment. No roommates, just me, my setup, and blessed silence. For 2 years, I kept minimal contact with Mom. Holiday calls, occasional texts. Each interaction was like poking a bruise to see if it still hurt. Spoiler, it always did. The final straw came during Thanksgiving at her place, 3 years after graduation. She'd invited her new boyfriend and his annoyingly perfect family. The whole dinner she kept telling stories about how she'd sacrificed everything for my education, how she'd always believed in me when nobody else did. Complete alternate reality BS. When I called her out on it later, she went nuclear. The mask slipped. I was ungrateful. I was cold. I was calculating. I was, wait for it, just like my father. I left that night in the pouring rain, drove straight back to my apartment, and blocked her number. Ghosted her completely. The irony wasn't lost on me. 6 months later, I moved across the country for a better job opportunity. Bigger tech scene. More possibility. That's where I met Lester, who would eventually become my business partner and one of the few people I actually trust. We clicked immediately. Both code junkies with complementary skills and similar views on work culture. Late nights after our day jobs, we started building our own thing. An idea that was basically the opposite of how my mother operated. A platform built on actual transparency and accountability. Won't bore you with the technical details, but trust me when I say we were solving a real problem in an innovative way. The next few years were a blur of ramen, Red Bull, and refusing to give up. We got small investments, built a team, failed, rebuilt, pivoted, and eventually found our footing. The day we moved into our first real office space, I thought about that refurbished laptop and that birthday party. How something meant to hurt me had instead become the first tool in building something real. Success came gradually, then suddenly. One big client led to another. Our user base grew. We expanded. I bought a house. Nothing extravagant but mine. No creaky steps. No eggshells to walk on. I hadn't thought about my mother in years when her name appeared in my inbox last month. Not directly to me. She had no idea the company was mine. Our names aren't anywhere on the public-facing materials. We learned early on to value privacy, and I use a different last name professionally now anyway. She had applied for our small business grant program. The same woman who told me my dreams were stupid was now asking for my money to fund hers. The application included a sob story about overcoming adversity that made me laugh out loud in my office. Lester asked what was so funny. When I told him, his face did this thing where it couldn't decide between shock and amusement. That's when the idea hit me. The perfect ghost story. Update. First, holy shit, you guys. Did not expect my last post to blow up like that. Thanks for all the awards and comments. To those saying I should have confronted my mom years ago, trust me, I've thought about it. But revenge, like good whiskey, gets better with time. And this was aged to perfection. Where was I? Right. The application from my mother landing in our grant program inbox. Talk about a blast from the toxic past. Look, the years between cutting off contact with my mom and finding her application weren't exactly a straight line to success. That's not how real life works. After moving across the country and meeting Lester, we spent 3 years building our platform while working full-time jobs that paid the bills. Our first office was his garage, complete with that distinct blend of motor oil, old cardboard, and desperation. We'd work until 2 a.m., fueled by those energy drinks that probably take years off your life, debugging code that refused to cooperate. The number of times we almost gave up, too many to count. But here's the thing about growing up with someone constantly telling you you'll fail. You develop this stubborn streak just to prove them wrong. Our first real breakthrough came when we managed to get a small investment from an angel investor who took a chance on us. It wasn't life-changing money, just enough to hire Megan, this ridiculously talented developer who could do in 3 hours what took us 3 days. She had this quiet confidence that made you trust her immediately, plus a healthy skepticism about our more ambitious ideas. We needed that reality check. For the first 6 months, we worked out of a co-working space that constantly smelled like someone's leftover lunch, the kind of place where the Wi-Fi would drop every time more than 4 people tried to use it simultaneously. Real, glamorous startup life. Just like in the movies, LOL. The first version of our platform was, objectively speaking, hot garbage. We launched anyway, had maybe 70 active users, most of them friends and family, who were too nice to tell us the UI looked like it was designed by drunk toddlers. But we kept iterating, kept listening, kept improving. Year 2 was when things started to shift. We landed our first enterprise client. Not a huge name, but a legitimate business willing to pay actual money for our service. I remember Lester and I splitting a bottle of cheap champagne on his balcony, looking out at the city lights, both thinking the same thing but not saying it. Holy shit, this might actually work. We moved into a real office, nothing fancy, just a small suite in a building with functioning air conditioning and bathrooms, where you didn't feel like you needed a tetanus shot afterward. Hired 2 more people, started paying ourselves enough to stop donating plasma for extra cash. Yes, we really did that for almost a year. Startup life isn't always pretty. By year 5, we'd grown to a team of 17. Our platform was actually good now. We'd found our niche and were steadily building a reputation for reliability and innovation. I bought a house, nothing extravagant, just a small 3-bedroom with a yard where I could grill on weekends and not hear my neighbors fighting through paper-thin walls. All this time, I never reached out to my mother, never checked her social media, never Googled her name at 3 a.m. after a few too many drinks. Okay, maybe once, but I closed the browser before hitting search. She was a closed chapter, or so I thought. Then came the day Vanessa walked into our office for a partnership meeting. Vanessa, my mom's friend from back home, the one who used to give me extra cookies when I came over to fix her desktop. She didn't recognize me at first. It had been over a decade, and I'd grown a beard, lost 30 pounds, and changed my last name professionally. But halfway through the meeting, I saw that look of slow recognition cross her face, the slight head tilt, the narrowed eyes, the moment the mental puzzle pieces clicked together. After the meeting, she hung back, asked if I was who she thought I was. I confirmed, but asked her to keep it quiet, professional boundaries and all that. But then she started talking about my mother, how she'd lost her job at the school district after budget cuts, how she'd been struggling to make ends meet, how she'd been telling everyone who would listen that her successful son never called, never visited, never helped her out in her time of need. I felt nothing, absolutely fucking nothing, and that surprised me. I'd expected satisfaction, maybe, or anger, but instead, there was this vast empty space where emotions about my mother used to be. It was almost peaceful. Vanessa must have sensed this because she quickly changed the subject, asked for a selfie to show her daughter who was considering a career in tech, promised not to mention our meeting to my mother. I believed her. Vanessa had always been kind to me, even when she didn't have to be. Months passed. Our company continued to grow. We launched a small business grant program, partly for the tax benefits, partly because Lester and I both came from backgrounds where a little financial help at the right time would have meant everything. Each quarter, we'd set aside funding for 3 to 5 small businesses with potential but limited access to traditional financing. The applications would come in through our website. Megan built a simple form that asked for basic business information, a pitch, financial projections, and a brief personal statement about why they needed the grant. Nothing too complicated. We wanted substance over polish. I wasn't usually involved in the initial screening process. We had a committee for that. But one Friday evenings, I was the only one left in the office when Megan stuck her head in my door. She had this weird expression on her face, something between amused and concerned. She mentioned there was an application I might want to look at personally. When I asked why, she just shrugged and said it was from my hometown. My hometown isn't exactly a thriving metropolis. The chances of someone from there applying to our program were slim. I pulled up the application on my screen, and there it was. My mother's name. My mother's business idea. My mother's sob story about being a single mom who sacrificed everything for her son, who abandoned her. The fucking audacity. I read it 3 times, each time getting angrier. The lies were so blatant, so calculated, so perfectly crafted to make her the victim. She was applying for funding to start a youth mentorship program focused on tech skills. The irony was so thick, you could cut it with a knife. This woman, who had systematically undermined every interest I ever had in technology, now wanted to pose as some kind of tech education champion. Lester found me still staring at the screen an hour later. He took one look at my face and asked what was wrong. I showed him the application, told him the real story behind her carefully constructed narrative. He sat there for a long time, just processing it all. Then he asked what I wanted to do. I could have just rejected the application, could have had someone else do it, could have ignored it entirely. But 20 years of suppressed rage doesn't just evaporate. It transforms, crystallizes, becomes something with edges sharp enough to cut. That's when the plan started forming. I knew how these grant applications worked. The finalists would be invited for an in-person pitch. They'd have 15 minutes to sell their idea to a panel of judges, usually Lester, Megan, and a rotating third person from our team. What if, just this once, I was that third person? What if I flew back to my hometown, sat across from my mother, and watched her lie to my face without recognizing me? What if I waited until the perfect moment to reveal who I was? I ran the idea by Lester. He thought it was risky, unprofessional, potentially damaging if word got out. But he also understood that some wounds don't heal until you drain the poison. He agreed to help with conditions. The other applicants would get fair consideration. The process wouldn't be compromised, and I'd need to be prepared for the fallout. For the next 3 weeks, I prepared like I was planning a military operation. I grew out my beard fuller than usual, got new glasses with heavier frames, practiced introducing myself with a slightly different cadence to my speech, created business cards with my middle name instead of my first. Small changes that add up to just enough difference. The committee reviewed all applications fairly. My mother's actually made it to the finals on its own merits, or at least the merits as presented on paper. The concept wasn't terrible. The financial projections were overly optimistic but not completely delusional. If I hadn't known the person behind it, I might have even been impressed. We scheduled the pitch meeting for a Tuesday afternoon at a co-working space in my hometown, booked my flight, reserved a rental car, found a hotel on the opposite side of town from where she lived. The night before flying out, I couldn't sleep, kept checking my phone, scrolling through Reddit to distract myself, drafting and deleting texts to Arnold asking if I was doing the right thing. Around 3 a.m., I finally admitted to myself what was really keeping me awake. Fear, not of confronting her, but of her still having power over me, of falling back into old patterns, of turning back into that 14-year-old boy who said nothing when he should have screamed. The flight was bumpy. The rental car smelled like someone had tried to cover up cigarette smoke with those little pine tree air fresheners. The hotel was exactly what you'd expect from a 3-star chain in a town whose glory days ended with the Reagan administration. I arrived at the co-working space an hour early, set up the room with Lester and Megan, who had flown in that morning, reviewed the scoring rubric, checked that the recording equipment was working, standard procedure for all pitch meetings, but this one I definitely wanted documented. The first two applicants came and went, a local bakery looking to expand, a landscaping business wanting to buy equipment. Both solid, straightforward pitches. Then she walked in. My mother, 20 years older but unmistakable. The same calculating eyes, the same forced smile that never quite reaches those eyes. The same way of taking up space in a room like she owns it. She didn't recognize me, not at first. I was just another face behind the table, another obstacle between her and what she wanted. She arranged her materials neatly, smoothed her jacket, began her pitch with practiced confidence. As she spoke, weaving half-truths with outright lies, I felt a strange calm settle over me. This wasn't the terrifying monster of my childhood. This was just a bitter, aging woman desperate for validation and cash. Someone whose power existed only in my memory. And then she mentioned her son, the successful tech entrepreneur who had abandoned her after she sacrificed everything for his education. How his success had inspired her to help other young people reach their potential. How she had always encouraged his interest in computers. That's when I leaned forward slightly, made direct eye contact, and waited for recognition to dawn. It took exactly 12 seconds. I counted 12 seconds for her to falter mid-sentence, for confusion to flicker across her face, for understanding to hit her like a physical blow. The moment had arrived. The ghost was about to speak. Update 2. All right, Reddit? Here's the final part of my story, as promised. Thanks for all the support on the previous posts. Seeing those notifications blow up my phone has been wild. For those just joining, my emotionally abusive mother told me to disappear like your real father did on my 14th birthday. 20 years later, she unknowingly applied to my company for funding, and I set up the perfect revenge. I left off where my mother was midway through her pitch presentation. The exact moment recognition dawned on her face. Those 12 seconds of watching confusion transform into shock were worth every minute of the 20-year wait. Here's the thing about seeing someone's facade crack in real time. It's both subtle and unmistakable. Her PowerPoint slide showing smiling stock photo teenagers gathered around a computer froze mid-transition. Her rehearsed spiel about nurturing young tech talent died mid-sentence. That practiced smile slipped just enough to reveal the panic underneath. I kept my face neutral, professional. The temp in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Lester and Megan, who knew exactly what was happening, maintained perfect poker faces, though I caught Megan's knuckles whitening as she gripped her pen tighter. My mother recovered quickly. I'll give her that. Always been good at thinking on her feet when it comes to manipulating a situation. She attempted to continue her pitch, voice slightly higher than before, eyes darting between me and the exit door like she was calculating her escape route. I let her struggle through another 3 minutes of increasingly disjointed presentation. Watched her trip over words she'd clearly rehearsed dozens of times. Noticed the slight tremor in her hand as she tried to advance to the next slide. The same woman who had towered over my childhood now seemed almost small, diminished. When she finally wrapped up her pitch, skipping at least 2 slides completely, I waited through 5 seconds of complete silence before speaking. Just long enough to be uncomfortable. Just long enough for her to start fidgeting with her wedding ring, a nervous habit I remembered from childhood. Then I leaned forward slightly and delivered the line I'd been crafting in my head for months. Sorry, we don't fund ghosts. Look, in movies, moments like this come with dramatic music and perfect lighting. In reality, it was just 4 words in a beige conference room with mediocre acoustics and the faint smell of someone's microwaved lunch lingering in the air. But those 4 words carried the weight of 20 years of silence. The confusion on her face was brief. Then understanding crashed over her like a wave. Her eyes widened. Her mouth opened slightly. For once in her life, she had absolutely nothing to say. I continued with practiced calm, explaining that her application contained numerous inconsistencies and misrepresentations, that our due diligence had uncovered concerning information about her background and qualifications, that we had serious doubts about her ability to manage the grant responsibly. Each point was a surgical strike, professional detached, devastating. Lester jumped in with questions about her financial projections, pointing out specific weaknesses with the precision of someone dismantling a bomb. Megan followed up with concerns about implementation timelines. We tag-teamed her like we'd rehearsed it. We had, actually, over beers the night before. My mother's responses grew increasingly desperate. She started by trying to appeal to my emotions, slipping in references to family connections and blood being thicker than water. When that didn't work, she switched to defensiveness, claiming we were being unnecessarily harsh and that other applicants surely hadn't faced such intense scrutiny. That's when I pulled out the folder containing printouts of her social media posts from the past 5 years. Posts where she'd claimed her son had funded her lavish lifestyle. Posts showing vacations she claimed I'd paid for. Posts thanking me for gifts I'd never given. An entire fictional relationship built for her online audience. I placed the folder on the table between us. Didn't even need to open it. Just tapped it twice with my index finger and asked how she'd explain the discrepancy between these public claims and her grant application, which portrayed her as financially struggling and abandoned by family. The color drained from her face. She knew exactly what was in that folder. For the next 10 minutes, we continued the charade of a normal pitch meeting, asked standard follow-up questions, made notes on our tablet, but the energy in the room had shifted completely. She was drowning, and all three of us were simply watching it happen. When we finally concluded the meeting, Lester and Megan left first, giving me the privacy they knew I'd need. My mother sat frozen in her chair, clutching her presentation materials like a shield. The moment the door closed behind them, she transformed. The vulnerability vanished. The mask fell away completely. She hissed that I had set her up, that this was cruel and unnecessary, that I had humiliated her deliberately. All true statements. I didn't deny any of it. Instead, I pointed out that everything that had just happened was simply consequences. Her consequences for years of emotional abuse, for the birthday comment that broke something inside me that never quite healed right, for the lies she'd told about me after I left, for attempting to profit from a relationship she had systematically destroyed. She switched tactics again, trying to minimize what she'd done, claimed I was being overly sensitive about things said in the heat of the moment years ago, asked if I was really going to hold a grudge over ancient history, suggested therapy might help me move past my issues. That's when I pulled out my phone and opened the document I'd prepared, a detailed list of every property she owned, every account I could legally find information on, every debt she was carrying, not obtained through any shady means, just the kind of financial research any potential investor would do. I explained calmly that while she wouldn't be receiving our grant, I had taken the liberty of sharing her application materials, including her fictional accounts of our relationship, with several other local funding organizations. With her permission, of course, right there in the fine print of the application she'd signed. Her face went from pale to flushed in seconds. She demanded to know if I was threatening her. I clarified that I was simply informing her of actions already taken. No threats, just information. Then I stood up, gathered my materials, and headed for the door. She called after me, asking if this was really how I wanted to leave things, if I really wanted to be the kind of person who would do this to his own mother. I paused at the door, turned back, told her that she had asked me once why I couldn't just disappear like my father did, that I had taken her advice, and now I was disappearing again, this time from her life permanently. The walk back to my rental car felt surreal, like I was floating slightly above the ground. Not triumphant, exactly, not jubilant, just lighter, like I'd put down a backpack full of rocks I'd been carrying since childhood. I texted Lester and Megan to meet me at a local diner instead of going straight back to the hotel. Needed grease and coffee and normal human interaction to ground me after what had just happened. They were already at a booth when I arrived, scrolling through their phones and trying to look casual while obviously dying to know how it went. Over plates of mediocre eggs and bacon that somehow tasted amazing, I gave them the abbreviated version. Megan asked if I was okay. Lester wanted to know if I thought there would be blowback. Both valid questions I didn't have great answers for. We flew back home the next morning. The whole time, I kept expecting to feel something different. Regret, maybe, or shame, or even just the anticlimax that often follows revenge fantasies finally fulfilled. But mostly, I felt calm, quieter inside than I had in years. 2 days later, the notifications started. My mother had gone nuclear online, vague posting about ungrateful children and betrayal without naming names, sharing inspirational quotes about forgiveness that were clearly aimed at making her look like the bigger person. Classic narcissist playbook stuff. Then came the texts from distant relatives, the concerned emails from hometown acquaintances who'd somehow found my work contact. Even Arnold called to check on me after somehow getting wind of what had happened. A week passed, her online meltdown intensified, then gradually tapered off as the algorithm's attention moved elsewhere. I filtered the messages, blocked the numbers I didn't recognize, and focused on work. One morning, scrolling through the applications for our next round of grants, I came across a submission from a small tech education nonprofit, actually doing the work my mother had only pretended to care about, run by a former teacher who'd been laid off in the same budget cuts as my mother, but who had responded by actually helping kids rather than just talking about it. I flagged it for the committee's attention, suggested we consider them for the grant my mother had applied for. It felt right, somehow, a way to close the circle. Lester asked me over lunch if I regretted any of it, if the revenge had been worth potentially complicating our company's reputation. If word got out, I considered the question carefully. No, I didn't regret it. Not the planning, not the execution, not the aftermath. Some people talk about revenge being an empty pursuit, but that hadn't been my experience. Mine felt like cauterizing a wound that had been festering for 20 years. Here's the thing about growing up with someone who uses your very existence as a weapon against you. You spend your whole life wondering what's wrong with you, why you weren't enough, what fundamental flaw made you unworthy of simple kindness. That shit burrows deep into your brain and builds a nest there. Confronting her didn't magically fix everything. I still have trust issues, still flinch sometimes when someone raises their voice, still have those moments of crushing self-doubt that feel like they're coded into my DNA. But seeing her mask slip, watching her scramble, knowing that I had built something real and lasting while she was still spinning fictional narratives, that was worth every second of the 20-year wait. 3 months have passed since the confrontation. Our company continues to grow. The small nonprofit got their grant and is doing amazing work with it. My mother, from what I hear through the grapevine, has moved to Florida to live with her sister and is telling everyone who'll listen about her successful son who runs a tech company, still living in her alternate reality. As for me, I'm doing better than fine. The ghost has finally been exorcised. Thanks for coming along on this journey, Red. For those asking if this story has a happy ending, I think it does, just not the kind where everyone hugs and makes up. Some relationships aren't meant to be repaired. Some people don't deserve second chances. And sometimes the happiest ending is simply walking away and building something better with the people who actually deserve your time.